This is the American Family Association and AFA Today.
Welcome you to New York City. Kevin McCullough, really glad to have you with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for every day deciding that you're going to do all that you can to build up the ability for your faculties to obliterate the confusion in the world around you, to focus on the truth that should be replacing that confusion, and then as a result, living your life in pursuit of absolute clarity. Kevin McCullough is my name. That's our mission here every single day. We are so grateful that you're with us. You probably you probably didn't realize this, but we might have something happening here in Washington, D.C. that, well, it hasn't happened in 6 years. We might possibly have a budget being produced. We might possibly have the opportunity for the government to say this is how you're going to measure what we spend and how we have the opportunity to plan for the year to come. And who knows? It might actually end up being something that they like so much they may do it again sometime if the mood hits them right. The big news out of D.C. in the last 24 hours has been that the House has decided to pass this budget, and it is not sitting very well. And I'm going to get back to this in just a little bit. There are people in the House that think it's a great deal. There are people in other places that don't. There's also a number of other things that we could spend time talking about today. Not sure that they merit exactly a tremendous amount of time, but some of them are just for fun, like the Santas brawling in New York this weekend. Evidently, things you don't know when you wake up in the morning, there's such a thing as SantaCon. You've heard of Comic-Con, where they dress up like comic book characters? SantaCon, same idea. We'll if I can find some visual of this, because evidently they got into a bit of a scrap on the streets of New York. Imagine that, a bunch of Santas pummeling each other. Anyway, it's a weird thing. Here's a headline that you just heard referenced in One News Now at the top of the newscast there. There has been a terror scare at Harvard. It does not. I don't have any other details other than what One News Now reported, but there were a number of buildings closed down, and they're taking the threat there very, very seriously. There's also another sad story out of Washington today that has to do with the chief of staff of a senator, the fired chief of staff for Senator Lamar Alexander to be released to the custody of his parents. His name is Jesse Loskarn. The 35-year-old waived his right to a preliminary hearing on Monday morning during his second appearance at the district's federal courthouse. That's in D.C. He has not entered a plea of possession and distribution of child pornography, but that's what he faces. Yeah. Everywhere you turn today, you've got fairly significant challenges. You've got sheriffs in 479 counties across the country that are refusing to enforce new federal gun laws if they go into effect. That's pretty interesting. It's kind of the reverse of what the federal government's been doing for a while with ICE and immigration's law. They don't like the fact that southern states are a little bit iffy about having immigration problems, so they just are choosing not to enforce any of the immigration violations that have been reported up the chain to the federal government. Sheriff's kind of turning that back around and saying, hey, you want to pass laws to take away people's guns, good luck with that. We're the ones that have to enforce that. Interesting. So there's a ton of stuff that we could talk about today, but there's one overriding story that I feel like it is important to discuss because it has the potential in what I feel like to do such damage to the country in so many ways, but it has to do with the idea of what D.C. is wanting to spend in the next few years. This is how CBS News reported it. Senate Republicans who spent much of the last week bemoaning a recent rules change making it easier to Democrats to confirm Obama administration appointees have their attention to turn to this week as it regards the budget. Dick Durbin said the struggle is still on in the United States Senate. The number 2 Democrat, Durbin predicted Democrats will need about 8 Republicans to vote with them in favor of the budget deal because Democrats can control about 55 votes. Now, pay attention to this, friends, because the Republicans who are overwhelmingly in the majority in the House, the people's body, are almost 100% against this deal in the state's body, the Senate. The Democrats in the Senate like it, while the Democrats in the House didn't like it so much. Just this amalgamation of influence on the bill already says to me, red flag, red flag. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid scheduled a procedural vote on the measure for Tuesday that will require 60 votes to overcome. If Durbin's vote counting is correct, Senate leaders have a long way to go this week. His diagnosis, helping a potential political angst for those who vote yes. Durbin said a handful of members of the Senate are vying for presidency in the years to come and thinking about this vote in that context, and others are frankly afraid of this new force, the Tea Party force, the Heritage Foundation force that is threatening 7 of the 12 Republican senators running for re-election. Well, you can take Senator Durbin, you can take all of this and you can put it through the really thin machinations of just pure politics, or you can look at it as the deal is intended. Now, before we went on the air today, I wanted to sit down with a couple of financial minds. Now, Governor Huckabee is scheduled to be with us tomorrow on this broadcast. He is going to weigh in on this from some different perspectives. But I asked Dan Celia of Financial Issues to join us. He was temporarily detained by some other work. But I was able to reach out to someone that I have great esteem for, and so does Dr. James Dobson. His name is Dr. Kirk Elliott, and I wanted to bring you a portion of some of the conversation that we had today as it related to this bill in particular. Some of this will also be heard on the Kevin McCullough Show later tonight on many of these same stations. But this was how we got into the discussion with Dr. Kirk Elliott and the budget story as it is coming out today. Kevin McCullough, so glad to be with you from New York, per usual, every single weekday. And yes, over the last several days, I've been trying to readjust to being back in America. It's a little hard for me, and I got to admit that on a couple of different levels, one of which is I just hate the politics of America. When I'm gone, and I'm not saying politics are any better anywhere else, but I come back and I realize how great a nation we could be, and I see the way we squander it, and it really, really bothers me, friend. And that's one of the reasons why I'm back on the air with you today, and so glad to be here. But over the weekend, over the last few days, there's been a lot of discussion about the budget that was passed out of the House. It is now expected to be going to the Congress, and in the process of that, I figured it's time to do a real deep dive on it. So you're going to hear on today's broadcast, on some others this week, we're going to talk to people like Mike Huckabee. We're going to talk to people that are economists and have their doctorates in world currencies and economies, and we're going to get some perspective on all of it. But friends, I want you to know it's up to you. It's up to you to stay aware of what your government does. It is up to you to be diligent, persistent, to hold them accountable so that as things come our way, we don't get surprised by it. It's just that important. So let me go to our guest line, because rejoining us here at the Kevin McCullough microphone is someone that, to be honest with you, he's found his calling in life, which is to if there is a way to do financial ministry, it is to help people be stewards of the resources that God gives them, so that they can make the most of them and do the most good for the kingdom of God. His name is Dr. Kirk Elliott. Some people call him America's Financial Doctor. His website is americasfinancialdoctor.com, and he comes highly recommended because people like Dr. James Dobson and Danny Johnson, for those of you that know those names, and others that are high profile in Christian media have turned to him in their hours of questions, and we are so honored that he is here with us today. Kirk, welcome back. Kevin McCullough, so glad that you're with us.
Thanks, Kevin. It's so great to be with you.
John Boehner and company threw this budget into the mix in the House, and it seemed to get a rather resounding okay from the Republicans in that side of the Congress. But I am not sensing the same thing from the senators in the United States Congress. So I need to go to somebody that can look at the videotape and break down the plays one at a time and tell us what's in this thing. Is this budget, first of all, should we congratulate Congress for even working on passing a budget? Because I'm trying to remember the last year that President Obama was going to get a budget on his desk that he might actually sign.
Yeah, I don't think we should be doing any rounds of applause here on this one. But sadly, I mean, you opened it up on this radio show program how politics is ugly. It is. You know, I heard Governor Huckabee recently say that politics is not theology. You know, it's easy to be a purist in your theology, but politics, a lot of these ugly things sometimes have to come out, and there's these ugly compromises. And you know what, Kevin? There is a lot of ugly compromises in this budget, and I don't like it. I don't think it's good for America moving forward. I understand why the House passed it. I do understand it, but I don't have to agree with it.
That cheerful voice, who sounds way more optimistic than anybody I would think working in economics today, is Dr. Kirk Elliott, and he does have his doctorate in world currencies and economics. And Kirk, when you did the deep dive on what is in here, talk to us a little bit about some of the things specifically that you don't like about it, because it's going to get pretty much whitewashed by whoever's talking in the media. It's either going to get panned by those that don't like it, or it's going to get rave reviews by those that do. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. But what were some of the things that you just did not care for in this budget?
Well, if we were to bullet point some of the things, it increases spending immediately for promises to reduce spending in the future. That's one thing I don't like, because whenever something is increased immediately, the promises in the future, history has shown us, really never come to pass. And so they're saying we're going to have reduced spending in the future. It's kind of like fool me once, fool me twice. This is horrible. So increasing spending immediately. It cuts Medicare using provider cuts that threaten access to care for seniors. What this means in layman's terms is price controls instead of sensible Medicare reforms. Whenever you have price controls, the doctors are going to say, we're just going to stop taking Medicare. We're just going to push the patients out because we can't afford to provide coverage for everybody. That's what price controls do. This is, in the world of economics, this is economics 101 type stuff. When you have subsidies and price controls, it pushes people out of the markets. It pushes the providers out because they need to make money. And here in Colorado, I was talking to a local physician, and he said, Kirk, we're going to have to start rationing our Medicare patients down to 2 a day. It's like, well, how many are you seeing? He said, well, sometimes 20.
Wow, 20 to 2, and that's just one amount of reduction that may occur under current situations. It's Kevin McCullough. We're talking with Dr. Kirk Elliott about the budget and its impact on the economy. Stay with us from New York. It's AFA Today, and we're glad you're with us here on AFR Talk.